Everyone, I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Eric.
And today I made Eric watch a horror movie. Eric and I are doing Halloween month here on He Made Me Watch, and last time we tackled Reanimator.
Yeah,
and
that was fun.
This time it's my turn. But you know what? I don't have anything to make you go, oh my god! Ah! And just squirm. I mean, there's some stuff in Child's Play, but I feel like you've watched enough of these kinds of things that even if you don't see it coming and you haven't seen it before, you're probably not going to have the, like, squirming, like, I look like I'm about to evolve into another creature kind of reaction.
Well, is there anything that involves eyes? Because that's my big...
Oh, it makes me wish we were watching Child's Play 2. Oh, boy. Maybe I'll make you watch that one down the road. Anyway, so Misery, I chose for the same reason that I chose Poltergeist, which is, how have you not seen this movie?
I actually have a history with not seeing this movie.
Interesting. Did you avoid it like the plague for some reason?
I never watched it on purpose.
And if so, sorry?
Well, I never watched it on purpose. There's actually kind of two things. One of them is my mother hates this film. She read the book, loved the book, movie came out, hated the movie. And it's something that like comes up whenever there's discussion of like book adaptations. My mom always brings up how much she hated Misery. So that
Which is interesting because Stephen King calls it one of the better adaptations of his work. And what he tends to say as opposed to adaptation is he says that's a pretty good flick. You know, like the story they're telling is a simplified version of the same story, but it's still, in my opinion, cohesive and works okay on its own. But I also haven't read the book because I don't want it to ruin the movie. I've always been a little bit afraid that that might happen.
And then a couple of years ago, my ex-wife read the book, loved the book, had to see the movie, saw the movie, and was super let down. And so, I had two people that read the book and had really not liked the movie, and so I just never bothered. But at the same time, the book never sounded that interesting to me, so I never read the book. Now, going into the film, I knew a lot. You knew
what some of the differences are.
Well, I knew some of the differences, and I knew a lot about this story. Some through osmosis, some through parody, and some through Stephen King talks about this book in On Writing.
Yes.
So I knew a lot about this going in.
Isn't this one of those books that he says somehow or rather he didn't realize what he was writing about?
I'm not sure.
Kind of. He has that with a couple
I can't remember.
things.
Yeah, he has that with The Shining. And there's a couple of books he doesn't remember writing. I don't think this is one of those.
No,
I think this is after he gets sober. I do know that this book is supposed to be a Bachman book. He writes it to be a Bachman book, and then Bachman gets outed.
I mean, if it is one of those, I don't know what that means. I feel like I remember that, but maybe that's wrong, because obviously it's a little on the nose, right? Like, you are a writer, so there's no way to look at this as, I mean, like, the guy writing it is right. It's hard not to look at this as, like somebody's greatest nightmare.
But The Shining's the same way.
Yeah.
In that it's about a writer who's an alcoholic, and Stephen King says that he wrote that entire novel, and the entire novel is a metaphor for alcoholism, very clearly. And he says he wrote the entire novel and didn't realize that. Or didn't realize, because he was an alcoholic at the time.
Well, and I guess this is sort of one of those, I don't want to say high concept, but one of those kind of premises where you might just think, okay, I'm a writer, what's a terrible thing that could happen to write? Like, you're writing what you know, and then you're like, what would happen if somebody got kidnapped by someone claiming to be their greatest fan? And that inherently wouldn't necessarily mean that like he's a person who's afraid of fans or worried about fan culture or even afraid of his own over commercialism, which is of course a big thing with Stephen King, and all those things could come out and snowball from that premise.
Well, and if I remember correctly from On Writing when he talks about it, I think there is a genesis of this. I think he does have an interaction with an overbearing fan.
I don't remember that from that, but I read that recently. But
maybe it's in something else I've read by him. Yeah. Talks about it, or just like an interview or something. But I feel like he had something happens that is like a fan over, like maybe they mailed him something. I don't remember, but I'm pretty sure there was something, or maybe multiple instances of not something like this, but you know, a scary fan.
Yeah.
Which we were talking about. You know, writers aren't what they used to be, and I feel
even
like
while we were watching the movie.
Yeah. I feel like this is probably a rarer occurrence than. I mean, the idea would be more rare now than it would have been in the 70s and 80s.
Especially because not as many people are reading now. I mean, I think that's a fair thing
to
say.
And we were...
now it would be like a screenwriter or a director or...
Yeah.
I mean, this could happen for a book writer, certainly. You have... I mean, what we were talking about is how book writers...
And everyone knows this
famous book writers, like at least that become famous now through their work, don't seem to be as big of a deal until their work gets adapted.
Which is... We were talking about George R. R. Martin. George R. R. Martin is huge, but he's huge because of the TV show.
Yeah.
Like, surely, I mean, there's lots of people that read those books. I heard a lot of people talk about how they were some of their favorite books before the show came out.
But I don't think, but importantly, I don't know necessarily that Sheldon has to be as popular as he is for this exact same story to be told. I don't know that he has to be mega famous. Like you could remake this and it be a somewhat lesser known person just because books aren't as big.
Well, I think part of it is the notoriety of him being missing. And the fact that everyone knows his work and that she could go get the first book or the first copy of a new book at like the local drugstore. Like he I'm not saying you couldn't tell this story with a smaller writer, but
what I'm saying is I think like it's all relative. So you know you could have somebody that's less famous than this, who's maybe even still a really famous book writer, but just because we live in a world where books aren't as big of a deal, that person would seem less famous than now, and still have the commercial issue of I don't get to write what I really want to write because these are the things that make money, and that's kind of what I was thinking.
Well, and this feels like something that can never be. This feels easy.
You don't want to see the remake of this movie,
right?
Well, I was thinking of that while we were watching it.
It feels like it's a really easy concept to apply to other things, but I don't think you can ever do that. Like, if you saw this movie with a director, or a screenwriter, or even if you saw it in like a comic about a comic, it would always just be, oh well, this is Misery, but with this kind of a thing.
Well, that's a good point.
It's a story that's really pure and
like if you readapted it, I don't mean a remake of this movie, but a pure like readaptation where you try to get closer to the novel or you had a different take on it. I think you set it period. I think it's set in the mid 80s, early 90s.
I would think so. But with the way movies are made, a lot of things in movies still look like they did 20 years ago, not now.
Yeah.
They might set it present and act like...
And still have it be a big famous writer, yeah. Although you could do the Martin thing. And like you could make it somebody like J.R. Martin, where it's something that did get. This is what I would do with it. It's somebody who had something that did get adapted, and then they never finished it, and that person is upset because maybe like the TV show has gone off without him, and they don't get to see the pure version of what it was supposed to be if he wrote it, something like that. So I mean, there's a modern application even to still make it a book writer, I think.
Yeah.
But it almost has to be someone that got famous, who either got famous or was writing before movies and video games and other kinds of culture took over as hard as they did, where people stopped reading books so much. I mean, we were already complaining about this at the time. This is as late as 1990. That doesn't feel like the Stone Age for me yet. You know what I mean?
That's like before I was born.
Yeah, and I mean, I was 6, but I watched this movie in the late 90s the first time, and it didn't feel outdated yet.
Do you want to tell everybody what it's about?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if we're already 10 minutes in. Most people know what Misery is, but maybe I would imagine watching this, but there might be.
Or you've seen the Simpsons parody or the SNL parody.
And I should mention that I have already done my bit on this before over on Sid Part 2's channel, and he and I and Steve have a really great conversation about it there that I'm sure gets more in depth and involved than you and I are probably going to get here. So I'll try to put a link to that in the description, and you can go check that out also. And Steve runs down all those differences and things. And notably, though, Steve says, even though he read the book and knows it really well, he knows it really well, he still likes the movie. He appreciates them for the kinds of things they are in different media. So that's interesting. And that was the big thing that made me go, maybe I will finally read the book. Maybe it won't totally ruin Misery for me. But maybe it won't put me in misery for Misery. But anyway, so and that's a fun thing they play with. Yeah, I think in this. Yeah. But anyway, so Misery is the simple down-home story about.
You've all heard this one before.
That's right. Yeah, it's based on the biblical parable, really. About the famous writer who gets in
really an Aesop's fable when you think about it.
It just shows up in a lot of classics.
I think there's a whole chunk in the Iliad that's about this.
I think Chaucer had a thing. But anyway, so
I've been bringing up Dickens a lot. I'm sure Dickens.
It's my favorite of the Canterbury Tales. But anyway, so you have. Can I go ahead and get into my synopsis? Because this is the joke that could just keep on spiraling out of control, like a car that's in the middle of a blizzard, which is where our tale begins. Where you have this...
Our yarn, if you will.
Where you have this famous writer named Paul Sheldon, who gets in a car accident in a small town where he's been writing his latest book. This is a guy who is kind of superstitious about his writing. He got famous after writing a book in a cabin in a particular small town. He lives in New York. This town is, I forget what state it's in.
I don't remember.
But
it's a snowy one.
It's a very snowy place, and he's up in the mountains. And he has this ritual for what he does after he finishes a book, and that plays into the story at the end. But part of the ritual is just he has to write it in this cabin, and he writes on a typewriter, and he gets in his car to leave, and there's this big blizzard he didn't know about. Really, the moral of this story is pay attention to the Weather Channel. And he gets in a car accident.
Maybe it didn't exist yet.
Maybe no, in 1990 he gets in an accident, and I mean, we're already past the heyday of MTV, really. But he gets picked up by a woman who's a big fan of his, who we discover, and I forgot this part of it, and I was really glad this was in there because it's not convenient. She's been stalking him, and that's why she's the only person that finds him. And he would have died without her. And she is obsessed with his work and is kind of, it turns out, a bit of a psychopath. And she had this. There's a backstory about a husband who died, and about her murdering babies at the hospital. She's a nurse. She's a former nurse. She's of course not doing that now. And one thing leads to another, and she decides that she's going to force him to write a new novel after the first one, or after this last novel that just came out.
He writes a series called Misery, or involving a character named Misery.
Yeah, and well, in each one is Misery something something. Yeah, and it's of course her favorite character, and in the last book he kills her off, and his plan is to finally get away from the Misery books and write what he's always wanted to. There's commentary there about the commercial nature of writing, where you'll have someone who gets famous with one thing and they can't stop writing that because that's what the fans want, but what they really want to do is something more cerebral and something more
heartfelt,
and just a passion project, for themselves. And it's the story you hear all the time from bands and musical artists, and you tap into what's popular at the time, but then you're stuck singing the same 5 songs over and over again.
Well, I'm sure because King never wrote a series like this.
Yeah.
But I'm sure he has that with horror to some degree.
Yeah, where it's hard for him to branch out and do something else he really wants to do, because it's not going to be as successful because people expect horror from him, and that's the deal with these Misery novels, and they feel like kind of a lowbrow, almost Harlequin romance novel thing, maybe.
That's what the covers look like to me.
They sound like maybe they're a period piece. I'm not sure when they're set, but they sound like they might be like 40, 50, 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And importantly, he has written his new manuscript, and he's about to...
And he has it with him.
Yeah, and he has it with him, and he's about to take it to New York to get edited, and she doesn't like all the profanity and stuff in it, and she's also, again, angry with him for killing off Misery, so she forces him to burn his novel and to start this other novel, and...
That's a sequel that brings back Misery.
Yeah, and she completely controls him, and there's a lot of suspense with his attempting to leave the house. And
his legs are broken the whole time, or are injured.
His legs are injured, and then she breaks his feet.
Yeah.
Toward the end, which is the big scene everybody remembers and knows from Misery.
And also the big one that I know is different.
Yeah, which I can't remember how it's different, but I know
she
cuts different.
She cuts his leg off.
Oh, okay.
As opposed to breaking it, which is so strange because that scene's pretty intense.
Yeah.
I don't feel like it would be any more intense if she cut his leg off.
I'm not sure why it bothers people, except that I haven't read the book, so maybe I would care more but like, I don't immediately know what the significance of that would be, if there's any kind of, you know, metaphorical something or symbol there or something.
I mean, I guess that's something that he would take with him.
Yeah.
You know, he's mostly better by the end of the movie. Theoretically, he would still be in a wheelchair.
Took something from him. That sort of thing. I don't think you need that.
That's one of the things. That's the big one that I know that people complain about. It's even in Buffy. The nerds complain about it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's a subplot with a sheriff who's, of course, investigating this and trying to figure it out.
Who's my favorite character.
And I love him.
Buster.
And then he ends up, of course, going to the house and getting killed by her in trying to find Sheldon. And he ultimately gets his poetic justice at the end. One of my favorite things about this is just how proactive he is. Mm-hmm. Where I feel like you're really with him the whole time, and he's not just laying around trying to figure out something. I like that it's a movie about writing, and one of the big tenets of a good story is that you have a proactive character that's after something, and he is embodying that himself in his story.
And I think that might be part of why I've always stayed away from the book, is I think I always thought it was just a guy in a bed the entire time.
Yeah.
And that just doesn't seem interesting.
But this is, I think, where he's just trying to do stuff.
Yeah.
And he's got a lot of personality, and he's interesting, and he's sarcastic, and I mean, like, One thing that I think is really hard in a thing like this is to make us buy how smart this guy is supposed to be, like how clever, and of course she calls him brilliant, but you can't take a lot of stock in that because of her literary taste.
Well, and because
she's a simple-minded person.
And he writes a first draft he writes the first couple of pages of this new book, and
well, let's just be honest. It's Terrence Mann's The Boat Rocker, right?
Yeah.
That's what he's writing, right? It's The Boat Rocker.
She's not okay with that he cheated and just said that Misery wasn't dead.
Yeah.
It has to be consistent no matter how outlandish it is. Mm-hmm. Because we find out what he rewrites, and it's nonsense. But because it's consistent, she's fine with it.
Yeah. Because she doesn't understand basic tenets of storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
For her, it's all kind of superficial and soap opera, and that tells you a lot about her too. I mean, we'll get into the characterizations, but I like how sarcastic and intelligent and how much of a personality he has. I buy this guy both as the commercial writer and as the real literary artist. Mm-hmm. Potentially, without having to really, without actually reading anything that he writes. I like that. And you can see a little bit of Stephen King himself in it, but he's not Stephen King either. I mean, he's definitely his own character. Well, let's find out a little bit about what Eric thought of this movie.
All right, so my big initial take, I go with my big initial take. My big initial takeaway is that I think Stephen King and I have a very similar fear and opinion of people that are relentlessly cheery and use other words instead of swearing, like really silly, childish words. I don't like those kinds of people. And after watching this movie,
that comes from a heavy religious place.
Well, and after watching this movie, I was like, that's exactly what I think all of those people are like when they go home. No, but I think all of these kinds of people are like this. Mm-hmm. I don't like these kinds of people, and I think Stephen King agrees with me. And this film is obviously a continuation of the love-hate affair Stephen King has with small towns. I was surprised I would imagine there's probably more in the novel, but I was surprised at how little we actually get to see of the town itself and the people in it.
Now, the town itself isn't really creepy. Like, it seems like a fine place.
Well, and that's what I was going to say, is this is maybe...
And importantly, she's outside of it. She's not even in the town.
This is maybe the most optimistic I've ever seen Stephen King write about a small town.
Assuming that it's not creepier in the book.
Yeah,
we're looking at a film.
Yeah. So, when we first start the movie, I'm immediately... There are two things I didn't know about this movie that jumped out at me, which is the writer and the director. Mm-hmm. The film was written by William Goldman, who is probably most famous for... he wrote the screenplay for Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, and both the book and screenplay for The Princess Bride. The film is directed by Rob Reiner, who directed The Princess Bride, and this is Spinal Tap. That's the other thing I know him from. He has a way of shooting doors. It's not in this is Spinal Tap because that's a mockumentary.
Yeah.
But he's a way of shooting doors that he shoots them the same way here. I don't know what that is. He just has a very specific way of shooting doors. Well, people standing in doors.
Yeah, well, and he kind of makes them look kind of larger than life and stuff.
Mm-hmm. And he does that kind of the opposite way in Princess Bride because it's a love story. But it's a similar kind of tactic. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Well, and now that you mentioned Princess Bride, because I had forgotten about that, it kind of it's kind of a fun, weird reversal, because this is a twisted backwards love story. Like, it's not a love story, but from her perspective, it is.
Well, and the lead actor is James Caan, who I know from 2 other films, and if those were the only 3 films he did, I would say it was an intentional him doing mirrors. Because the first film I know him from is The Godfather, where he plays the violent son who beats his wife, and like he seems kind of cool, but then he has like this real quick temper. Here, he's a very creative person who is at the mercy of someone with a quick temper. And then the other film I know him from is he's the dad in Elf, which is the flip.
I didn't realize that. I haven't seen that in so long.
Well, and that character is the flip of this character, where he's all about the commerciality of it, and doesn't actually care about substance or story. And
interesting.
So, if those were the only 3 films he did in his entire career, I would think he was just constantly doing reversals. I like this film. I don't know if I love it. I mean, I'll say I'm feeling it. But the big thing watching this movie is I was like, I want to read the book.
Yeah.
Because there's so much stuff in it where I'm like, I bet you this scene is amazing in prose. And it works well as a film, but there's a lot of things where I'm like, I bet you this works really well in prose. And there was a lot of little details that there's no way you could ever give in a film.
Yeah.
Because I bet you Stephen King goes into this guy's entire writing history. And I'm really interested in that. Because originally I thought maybe he was a bigger writer who got stuck in writing this series. But it seems like maybe he put out 1 or 2 novels that did okay, and then he gets big with this series. And then there's a lot of stuff with things that in the film seem kind of convenient or not explained. I'm sure explained in the books. The big one is, how does she get all her supplies? The medical supplies.
Medical supplies, yeah, that's a good question.
That's not a thing that you would just generally have, even if you were a nurse. Like, I know nurses can sometimes like steal things from their work.
That was kind of the assumption I always made, was that she probably stole some of it, but there's a lot of it.
And I can't imagine that she's still working. Like, that would mean she's just had this in her house since she's been convicted, because she doesn't go back to work as a nurse. There's no way.
No, and I don't know what she's done. One thing I always wondered is, I don't know how she's supporting herself.
Yeah.
She doesn't go to a job.
And there's a lot of small details.
I mean, maybe it's a family home and she owns it outright, but I don't know how she's supporting herself.
Well, we see a pig, maybe it's a farm. It's referred to as a farm. Maybe she's doing something with that.
But
I don't know.
But we don't see any other animals of the farm. It doesn't look like there's... And she's not constantly outside, like, doing stuff.
I guarantee you there was something else going on with that pig in the book, because the pig just kind of shows up, and then you see it in the scene, and you never see it. And I thought it was weird because she's in Babe.
Well, it isn't that you never see it again. Like it comes back 2 or 3 times.
Oh, does it? I only remember seeing it one more time, where she's walking outside and she's like, "Hey, misery," and then he flips her off.
Yeah, but that's pretty late in the movie. Like we first see it like in the first act, and we see it again in the third act. And then there's a callback to it when of course he hits her in the face with a pig statue thing.
Well, and I was waiting for something. What I thought was going to happen with the pig was that the pig was going to do something and she was going to like kill it in front of him, and be like, "See what happens when you're bad," or something like that. But the pig's kind of just there. And maybe that does happen in the book. I don't know, because
Yeah, and I haven't given the pig a whole lot of thought. Maybe there's some kind of a symbolic thing there that I haven't really given a lot of, that I haven't figured out. I can't remember if we talked about that when I talked about it with Steven. And,
I really like James Caan in this role.
Yeah, I think he's great.
She's really good too. She is able to go big without it being hammy. She's never funny when she's being scary.
Yeah.
And that's always a fear with a role like this. But I thought the two of them were great and great together. They're really good at playing it. And because this is almost a closed room drama. Mm-hmm. We cut away a little bit, but it's mostly a closed room drama. Well, that's why I
like how simple it is, and why I kind of want to read the book and see if I buy that some of the details people wish were in the movie could have been integrated organically. Because one of the things
they probably couldn't have.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I love about this movie, and you have to think about adaptation. You have to think, you're making a movie and not a book. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I love about this movie is that exposition is always handled really deftly. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure I totally buy the scrapbook. Mm-hmm. That was the thing you brought up while we were watching. Yeah. I've always kind of had that too, where for the sake of exposition, he's able to flip through this book of newspaper clippings where we see her whole dark history.
Yeah, she's got newspaper, or she's got it's a scrapbook of her life.
And I'm sure you could make a case that if we could pin down exactly what mental disorder she has, that could be a part of it. I suggested to Eric while we were watching that she might have kind of conflicting things in her personality.
She probably has some kind of bipolar disorder. Yeah, she flips like that. Yeah. Almost like she's two halves.
Yeah, exactly. And my assumption was, or my idea was, maybe she's like she wants so badly to be important and to have some kind of significance that she can't help but chronicle her own achievements. Well, and that's why she has that stuff, even though she's also in denial about what kind of person she is to a degree.
Well, and I was kind of surprised.
But she also keeps justifying it because, I mean, when you get to the end, she seems like she has a perfect, in her mind, logic for doing the double murder.
It's a lot of God talking to her. She brings that up a lot.
Yeah.
Which is another thing that reoccurs in Stephen King. That's Carrie's mom and Stephen King is...
And that tends to be a serial killer thing.
Yeah. Well, but with King, it's him... It seems to be him constantly trying to work out where he stands.
I just mean in real life.
Yeah.
I think that's a thing that comes up.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting... I want to mention this real quick because I might forget. Since I brought up the gun, I think it's interesting. I don't know if I had noticed this before, that she really does have 2 bullets in that gun.
Yeah. Yeah. She says she's going to put 2 in, and she has 2 in.
Yeah, because the first time I saw this, I really expected she was lying, and that she was going to kill him, and that she was going to then publish that novel. Because she talks about that, where she's like, I'm going to make sure that the novel gets gets out and people get to see it. And
and there's a real romanticized notion that he'll die and she'll die, and like they'll be found, but so will the novel.
Yeah, and that she'll go down in history for inspiring him because she makes a point of saying, because of course she's co-plotting it in that or not exactly, but like she's forcing certain things to go in the book, and one of them is it's going to be dedicated to me.
The scrapbook surprised me a little bit because it's not what I thought was in that. I thought what I thought was going to be in it was years of her stalking him. Pictures she'd taken of him and things like that. So I wasn't expecting any kind of backstory for her at all. I thought that it was going to be like no one ever suspected. Like she's the first person you would suspect.
Yeah, well, that's true, but I also like it because it feels more believable that she would go this far. Like, she's a more sympathetic antagonist in that, I mean, she's not likable and she's a crazy person, certainly, but when you get some of her backstory, you realize she wasn't always crazy, or maybe she was an extreme personality that got pushed over the edge, because we never know everything.
One of the big bits that I really liked, that I think really works in film, that might actually be too on the nose in the book. We keep bringing up the book.
Yeah, because we haven't read it.
But it's when because the sheriff starts reading all of his novels to see if he can get like a sense of the guy or like something like that, and
which ultimately ends up being a little bit of coincidence.
Well, and he hits on a line.
That's a little too easy.
Well, and he hits on a line, and he writes the line down, and, like, there's something about this line, and we don't know what it is. And I bet you in the book, it's a very clear, this sounds familiar. And in the movie,
they don't make that clear enough in the movie.
Well, but that's what I like about it, is that you have no idea why. It plays as a reveal, as opposed to in the novel, I feel like it sets up. Like I just kind of read it as, like, oh, well, he kind of likes that line because he's a cop.
And I've gone back and forth on it where I haven't been completely sure if the idea was he remembered that line from. I'm leaning toward that must be what it is, because when he sees her, he's reminded of something. He's like, oh yeah, she's that nutso lady who everybody
Which seems
thought,
like something you would know.
That's the problem with it, right? Is that when you're in that helicopter and you're looking over her house, like, I don't know how, like, she wouldn't immediately be a suspect, but I feel like people would watch her closer in that town. That's a thing. Where, how is it not common knowledge that that's that old crazy lady that everybody thinks killed babies at a hospital, and she got off and on the witness stand, and she ended up not getting charged, and then, you know, she can go to prison, and so we can't do anything to her, but she's ostracized. That's why she lives farther out. I would have assumed if people knew it, and I would think that everyone would know that she's obsessed with those books and that she buys them all the time.
That's not something I feel like everyone would know. I mean, like, the shop owner knew.
Yeah,
and the second that he found out she was a fan of the books, he's like, wait a second. And then
I just feel like people would watch her more, and so maybe they would know that about her, but...
Yeah, I don't know, it played well to me. And I feel like in a book it might be too obvious, where he's like, that sounds really familiar. Where, like, in the movie, I had no idea why that line had significance until later. And I like that. I'm going to assume there's probably a lot of things that were changed. I don't know, but it feels really Stephen King-y. A lot of the dialogue just really sounds Stephen King.
And a lot of Stephen King movies do not nail that.
No.
And I think that's why this is one that's heralded as one of the better Stephen King movies. And it just... Whether you like it or not, based on that novel, it is a cohesive piece. You don't feel like you have to have read that to
knowing there is a book, I'm interested to learn the details. It doesn't take away from the film itself.
Yeah.
It made me want to go read the book and see what more there is.
And some of what makes it feel so Stephen King-y is that it takes its time. It lingers in scenes on things that it ought to. It's not boring, but, like, we spend a great deal of time with him, like, crawling across the floor, trying to do things, building up that kind of suspense. I feel like it has really good timing in its tension, and it also has a really good attention to detail, which is, of course, something that Stephen King's books usually have.
Yeah.
We're really meticulous about what we're placing in rooms, what that's saying about her character, and a lot of really great setup and payoff, and especially foreshadowing moments.
Well, and given that I know, or that there's really only two characters in this story, like, there's some other ones, but there's really only two characters in this story, I feel like I know a lot about these people, and I really understand them as characters. Like a lot is conveyed.
It's using their real estate to do all that, but it's doing it visually. I mean, that's part of why, even if there's a whole lot that is missing from the book, I'm hoping that I'll have a hard time dogging it for that too much, because it is a movie. Like, it really understands its medium.
Yeah.
And I think the setting is great. I mean, I just think the atmosphere helps it, tremendously.
Yeah.
Because, like, not only are his legs broken and is he stuck in this cabin out in the middle of nowhere, but I mean, like, it's snowy. Even if he got out of the house, where would he go?
Which is something that I was always thinking of whenever he, like, tried for, like, a door or something.
It feels like a classic story.
Are there many doors that have just locks for a key?
What do you mean?
Like, he tries the doors to the outside, and I've never been in a house that the turn isn't on the inside.
I don't know. Maybe older doors, maybe older houses.
I don't know. That was the one thing that stuck out to me, because it's a thing that happens in Goosebumps, and there's a joke in the movie when the monsters start attacking and they try to leave, and R.L. Stine goes, "They've locked the door from the outside," because that's such a ridiculous notion. And, like, here,
yeah, good point.
Like that was the one thing that stuck out to me, where I was like, that seems a little convenient that there's no The locks aren't on the inside of the door.
Silly horror cliche at this point.
Yeah.
And, like, maybe she replaced her locks knowing she was going to try to bring him there, but that's a big stretch. And she couldn't have known, like, she's stalking him. I don't think you can make the leap that she thought she was going to take him back.
Well, one of the things I really like is that there's no implication that she ran him off the road.
Yeah, good point.
I really like that. I feel like that would be the really...
watching him from afar.
Yeah, that would be the really easy way, and it was, she had her moment. And so she took advantage of that.
Well, and it makes things more complicated for him psychologically because because again, without her, he would be dead. Mm-hmm. So he needs her, but then she ruins his manuscript. She hurts him. He's possibly not going to make it through all this alive. And I mean, like, he goes through this great nightmare scenario where from the very beginning, I mean, again, it's really using its real estate well, and it's making sure that every moment counts. Where at the very beginning, in really what's probably like the most exposition-y scene, but it's still realistic enough, I think.
When he's talking to his agent?
When he's talking to his agent, where right away we find out what his life is, who he is, what he wants, and how hard that is to get. Mm-hmm. And and it's kind of cool because he's on his way maybe to getting the thing he wants. I think it's important that, or maybe not, because it's important that at the end his new manuscript looks like it's going to sell really well, and that the critics really love it. And that's not the book he wrote before, or if it's a similar book, it's one that's been informed now by the experiences that he had in that cabin. And so he's he talks even at the end about how he needed this.
This influences Birdman quite a bit. Yeah.
Well, I didn't think of that. Sure.
Like, I feel like the way he feels about his writing is very much how Michael Keaton's character feels about his acting.
Yeah, well, I don't know that you have to go back to this. I think that's a thing that a lot of artists end up feeling. A lot of artists that get popular, and I love seeing the other side of fame because it's so easy to go, oh, you're famous. What do you have to worry about?
Yeah.
And that's a tough life, especially mega fame. Nobody would have wanted to be Michael Jackson.
No, not at all.
You know, you probably wouldn't want to be Michael Jordan. I mean, like, that's a tough life to live.
Well, and Stephen King has a house down where I used to live. And I have a friend that tells the story about how he was at this house at a party, that in a house that was like next to or near Stephen King's house. And, like, Stephen King stepped out on the balcony, and like all of these people like, "Hey, Stephen King!" You don't want that.
No.
You want to be able to step out on your balcony.
Well, and that's not conducive to the writing life. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a thing to consider. Is how much harder is it to hone your craft and to work on that when you can't have a moment's peace, when you're distracted all the time. I mean, I find it hard enough doing my job having kids. I can only imagine if I was mega famous.
I find it interesting how much of his routine is public. Because you would think, as big as he is, he wouldn't want people to know that he goes to the same hotel and writes his books.
It's a good point. Yeah, that's fair. I mean, and it doesn't seem like it comes from paparazzi. It seems like it comes from interviews he's given.
Yeah. I can understand talking about the one cigarette, the one drink,
but like exactly what hotel?
Yeah,
all of that, and that's maybe convenient. That's there so that she can go find him,
or maybe she lives there, and like that's a thing that the town knows, but isn't super public. I don't know.
That's possible because they don't come right out and tell you.
But maybe all his stories are set there.
And she
like
also
Stephen
possibly
King's
knows more than anybody else does because she's dug harder and she's maybe done some uncouth things to find out some of that stuff. I mean that's unreasonable.
Yeah.
To guess at. But what I was going to say real quick is I really like this nightmare scenario where you finally bite the bullet and say, I'm going to take the risk and write what I always wanted to write, and then you get kidnapped by the personification
of everything you're afraid of.
Everything that you hate that you produce because you're afraid that you're wasting your life. And then
it's someone that eats it up, has no critical standards, thinks everything he does is brilliant.
Yeah, and then and then destroys the thing that he was like
he's proud of and poured his soul into.
Yeah, because by the end, like it's maybe kind of obvious and on the nose, but I like the poetic justice bit. You know, I like that he sets one of the best things about the story. I think is that and this is such a writer thing. I love this. The idea that it's not about anybody reading it. And this is important, right? He not only writes the first book that's not Misery for himself. He not only writes the second book that people actually get to read for himself, but he writes the Misery novel she forces him to write for himself because he's not going to let her read it.
Yeah.
And I think it's important because I don't know if you had this, but the first time I saw this, I had this moment while he's writing where they not the montage, but toward the end where he's finishing it, where I'm like, well, if you're just going to set it on fire, what's the point? Why are you finishing it? It's because he's got to have that for himself, right?
I was going to say something. Oh, well, and when we get to the end, we're told that it's getting rave reviews and that he's going to be up for awards, and he doesn't care.
Yeah.
I think, like...
And for the same reason he doesn't care if anybody ever reads... Well, not the same reason, but it's similar. Where he doesn't care if anybody reads this other Misery novel. He wrote it so he could do that to her. That's his revenge.
I really like that he, until the very end, when he fights back, he's smart enough to never lose it on her. He never says anything about her being crazy, about, like...
He'll be sarcastic, and he'll be like, we both know that you're pretending like I'm enjoying this, or like we're friends,
and he won't get angry, and he never gets angry at her. I think that's a really interesting, because I feel like if
he pleads with her when she's going to break his legs, but that or his feet, but that's a real human in the moment. What are you going to do? Like I'm stuck.
But I feel like if someone else were to write this, like there's like a token scene where he like blows up at her and then learns not to do that again. I like that he doesn't do that. I like that he is smart enough to know this person is unstable, and I should keep it in check.
Well, it feels like and I'm not saying that all writers are the same, obviously, but it feels like a temperament that you get specifically from this kind of person. Like, he really comes alive. He's not generic at all. Like everything he does, it feels like this is what this guy specifically would do. And I feel like you could almost go as far as to say that maybe he understands her thought process to a degree because he's a people watcher, he's a writer, he's about the human condition. Like, I don't know, he catches on to things quicker than I think other people might in that situation.
Yeah, or especially in something written. You like we always like to play our main characters as being dumb in horror situations.
That's a really good point. Yeah. Well, and I think that's one of the reasons I like this movie so much is because it is a character piece and it's a horror movie, and I never get. Maybe it's better to call it a suspense thriller, but
we should read a book
and kind of a psycho
and do it. And
we should. We can do it. Yeah, we can do read a book on that book. That's a good idea. And that's something we could easily get 2 copies of and read at the same time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's. There's something else I was going to say about that whole thing.
You're talking about how he's smart and it's a character piece in a horror film.
Yeah, it's because I'm not usually, a big. Obviously, I'm not a horror guy, but this one always stuck with me, and I go back and watch it semi-frequently.
One of my favorite bits was when she brings up the film serials.
Yeah,
which is something that never gets brought up in like major films. People talk
that
about
was
it
early enough that she could have been a kid and gone to the theater for that stuff.
Well, people talk about film serials in like interviews and how they influence things, but characters never talk. Like we never discuss these things in film.
Well, I guess that's a good point. Yeah.
So like that stood out to me as like a really interesting character trait, and the fact that all of those things have such lazy cliffhanger resolutions. My favorite one is, I think it's in the Batman one, where he's falling off a building, and then when you come back the next week, there's just another building right below him. He just lands. But I thought that was a really, that was the best way, at least for me, because I'm semi-familiar with that kind of material, to figure out what it is she wants. She just wants consistency.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be good.
Yeah, and that's informed by her background because she lost her husband. I'm assuming she murdered babies because then she couldn't have any. That's that's the best I can come up with, unless she also murdered the husband.
Which was my initial take, but then we never really go back to that.
Yeah, and this is a discussion I had with Steve and Ian, and we kind of, I think, came to the conclusion together that we didn't think that was what was going on.
And maybe that's what kind of...
And that's what spirals her out of control.
Well, and doesn't she say that when he died, she threw herself into her work, and she found the Misery novels.
Yeah.
The Misery novels are what got her through that.
And she likes them, importantly, I think, partly because they're safe.
They're pure.
Because,
it's the purity of them.
Yeah, it matches with her, what she wants to be her rosy worldview.
And she brings the new manuscript to him, the one that he's written that he had with him, and her major complaint is how much people curse in it.
Right.
And he's like...
It's too real.
And he's like, but it's set in the streets. I grew up in the streets. Everyone talks like this.
And that's him writing what he knows, which he hasn't been doing.
And she flips out on him. I don't talk like that. Like, not even... Like, she doesn't have this... She doesn't understand this idea of different people live in different situations and live differently.
Well, and it's all about control, because, of course, she's seen the ugly side of life, and she's put it away and is trying to pretend like it's not like that, which is, again, part of why I think we question the scrapbook.
And that's part of what I think is in every person is cheery and doesn't swear. I think they're all holding something dark deep down.
How impressive is it how clear of a sense by the end you think you have of what the Misery novels are without ever reading a line?
Yeah.
Or reading much of a line. Like, we don't really know that much about that
world. Well, and you get a
world.
sense of his other work, too. Not the last one, but the one you... Like, I kind of feel I know what kind of novels those are. I feel like I know what kind of novel he wrote. And you just get a little bit. Like, you don't even get lines of dialogue, but, like, you just get them talking about it.
And it's because those characters come alive.
Yeah.
It's because we understand what they're about so much, and because his writing the Misery novels and his attitude about them now, and why she loves them so much. Those are both reflections of their personalities.
Well,
and who they are now versus who they used to be.
And this film works because of the two lead actors. If you got people who weren't as nuanced or able to play it as well, this novel or this movie doesn't work as well.
You're absolutely right. One of the most impressive things to me in his performance is how he's able to, how he almost chokes on words sometimes when he's trying to play her. This is a thing I picked up more this time than I ever
it's
had
not something
before.
I noticed.
Especially in the last scene, when he I forget what exactly the line is, but when he's trying to get her... Oh, I know what it is. When she's bringing him the stuff he needs for the ritual at the end of writing the book, and he says, this time we're going to need 2 glasses, he chokes on that. That is hard for him to say, because he is pretending like he's going along with this, and like... Because, I mean, the whole idea of the end of this is... She's gonna kill them both, and they're gonna have they're gonna have like a dual suicide. And he's tapped into how delusional she is, and so even but there's this kind of, like, in a good way, wink to the audience where we can tell from his facial expression that he's that it's not easy to pretend like you're going along with all this, and it tells you something about him and it tells you something about her, because her not picking up on it tells you a lot of things. It tells you how delusional she is, but it also goes into her being simple-minded, not picking up on nuance, not understanding subtext. And
that happens when in the scene where they have dinner together and he tries to poison her drink.
Yes, it happens there too.
Which I really like that scene.
And both of those are things with the wine glasses.
Yeah, yeah.
Wait, like I said, so much setup and payoff.
Yeah.
Foreshadowing is what I meant to say there.
Something else I was going to bring up that I thought of while you were talking. With him being uncomfortable with... I don't know what it was. It was something. It was real insightful. You all missed out.
There's also some wonderful moments of levity. The humor in this is almost all sarcastic. But I really like that moment. And again, I like this because I'm a stickler for the personal touches where you go... Every time I'm watching, especially a piece that's about a singular character, I always want to... point during it say, like, know a character so much that I say, oh, that's so-and-so. And I have that numerous times with this guy. And one of my favorite moments is when he picks up the hairpin and he tries to and he tries to unlock the door with it, and he says, and he's not sure if it's going to work, and he does it because he's written it in books and he thinks maybe it'll work. And of course his whole plan hinges on this. And he goes, well, I've written about this, why can't I do it? And then he's able to do it, and he goes, oh wow, that actually works. And I love that.
I love the relationship that the sheriff has with his wife. I think that's delightful.
I was wondering if you would enjoy that or not, because yeah, it's really funny, but I thought you might think that it was wasting time.
Oh no, I enjoyed those two characters. I liked him. He's probably my favorite character. I enjoyed him so much, and I was really sad.
His best line in the whole movie is when he's talking to a guy on the phone. Somebody called. Like I love all the small town moments because again, we're like. All the details tell us something about who these people are. Nothing is arbitrary. Like it all gives you a sense of
time
at all. You get a sense of the flavor of the town and the flavor of these people. And I'm originally from Southern Arkansas. I know these people, and that was fun too. The sheriff, he answers the phone and he says, whatever the guy's name is, look, if you're gonna have benches outside your store, folks are gonna want to sit on them. I'm not gonna come out there and tell him to go away.
I don't like him either.
Yeah, that was great. And all the stuff with his wife was funny.
My favorite scene of his is when he's looking for the note. And he's yelling at his wife. He's like, "You moved everything. There's a system.
I have a system."
And it's just piles of paper. And he's like, "There it is, right where it's supposed to be."
Did you like his list to the publicist about all the roles he has in the town? Where he just goes on and on. Yeah, and if you want to talk to this person, that's me.
But I also like that he leads with which one, even though he is both of them. He could have just said speaking.
And he has a real specific, consistent sense of humor.
Yeah.
And you know, this is a thing. Not to get too like into my and Eric's personal discussions, but you know, you and I are always talking about dad jokes. He has like the kinds that are funny.
Yeah. He really does. I explained dad jokes to Cap. He'd never heard that term before.
You might not have either.
And then, like, when I started explaining the kind of jokes, he's like, "Oh yeah, I know those jokes."
It's just really lame jokes that like your dad says because you know you're a kid and
it's like dad magic tricks, like you know the thumb. Ooh.
What you got there? Nothing. But anyway,
yeah. So I enjoyed this. I would very much like to read the book. Not that I didn't enjoy the film. I like the film, but it really does make me want to. There's a lot of just. It's really the little details. His background. Yeah. I want to get more into his head. And the big one is the medication. We never find out what it is. We just kind of get the sense that he knows it's bad. I'm willing to bet in the book we find out exactly what it is she's giving him. But
well, and you're right. That's a question. Is how does he know that she's putting him out, and that he's not just like delirious or really tired?
I think it might be just because it goes on so long.
And I think that's what it is. Yeah. Because he's starting to. I really enjoy trying to guess when he's starting to pick up that things aren't quite right, that she's not gonna let him use the phone or take him into town, that the roads are clear but she's pretending like they're not, all of that stuff. And it's several days and she's still and we go back and forth. So because we're going to the sheriff, we know what's actually happening outside, and that it's been so many days, it's been so long since the roads were clear that he can't even remember when the blizzard happened. Like, I like that. He's like, he asked his wife, like, when did that blizzard happen again? Meanwhile, she's pretending like the roads aren't clear, she can't even go into town.
There was two things that I wanted to know as, like, alternatives. Like parallel timeline kind of a thing.
Okay.
Where, if this didn't happen, what would happen? You want, like,
a Marvel what-if for this movie?
No, but there's 2 points where, like, where I want to know if this didn't happen, what would happen? And the big one is if Misery doesn't die at the end of the book. Yeah. What does she do instead? Or does
she do anything?
Well, because she makes him write the new novel because she's so furious she dies.
Yeah.
If she didn't die, what would her reaction be? What is the end game for her?
Well, yeah, and then there's probably just not as interesting of a story there. Like, maybe she... Because the whole thing ends up being about resurrecting that character and her feeling important in making that happen. There's no story, really, like, or it's much shorter, right? Where, okay, she could read the manuscript and not like it and try to force him to burn it, but even still... Her forcing him to burn it has everything to do with you've gotten off course because she realizes she didn't read the writing on the wall before with the new book. Now, one thing I wondered about is how are they not touting that up as the last one?
Well, and
like I guess she doesn't know that when she reads it because she's really surprised by the ending. So
well, and she loves it up until the ending.
Yeah,
she says like I've only got 20 pages left, and she still thinks it's the most.
She also says the only two perfect things in the world are the Sistine Chapel, which she can't remember the name of, and this novel.
And I'm willing to bet that Misery's death is foreshadowed all throughout that book.
I bet. That's a thing that I really wondered was, since she doesn't understand nuance and subtext, and theme, and even probably the intricacies of even characterization at all, I wonder if those books are worse than you would think or better. I really wonder what those books are like.
I imagine that the first 1 to 3 are actually probably pretty good, and then it drops off because he doesn't care and he's just hammering out.
He's plugging in for a formula at that point. Yeah. I'm almost sure, which is clearly what he's doing at the end.
Which is a problem that a lot of long-running series have. You get a lot in...
So you're just trying to maintain the momentum. I mean, it's really difficult to put your heart and your soul into, especially when that's not what you'd really, rather be doing. It's like Huey Lewis did all these rock records, and they all started to kind of sound the same. He got really good at just cranking out those rock songs. What he really wanted to do was blues, and once he was no longer the big hot ticket anymore, he went and did that. And so, like the last time I saw Huey Lewis in concert a couple of years ago, and the majority of that he plays his hits. The majority of that concert is him playing blues. And might I say, you would think you'd be a little bit let down because you thought you were going to a Huey Lewis concert and it turned out to be blues. Oh my God, he's amazing! He's playing songs you've never heard before because he goes back. He did a record where he goes back and he finds songs that he thinks kind of ought to be standards that have been kind of fallen off and stuff, and he just does that, and like they're not huge selling records, but he's Huey Lewis. He can do that, and I think that's where Paul Sheldon is at.
It's a thing my grandfather used to do, where he would pick up a book series and he would read it till he figured out the formula, and then drop the series.
Interesting.
So like he would read 4, 5, 6 books in a series, and once he figured out what the formula was, he was done with it. The hack writer, he's just writing for a formula now.
He would have watched 3 episodes of Smallville.
He wouldn't have watched any. He lived through Smallville and didn't watch a single episode.
He lived through it. I also lived through Smallville.
We're living with Smallville.
Yeah, at this point, yes, we are. No, we're living through Arrow and Flash and Legends at the moment. Anyway.
But yeah, so I like this movie. Next week or next episode, you'll be watching one of my movies, and I have no idea how you feel about it. It could really go either way.
I hope at some point you'll sit down and watch this again, because I think there's more to pick up on.
Yeah,
and I want to read the book too, and I think we should do that. But I think another viewing of this after reading the novel would be interesting too.
Yeah, absolutely. So we should plan on doing that at some point.
Absolutely, we should. We'll add that to the long laundry list of dozens of things that we're going to read, that we'd like to read or watch or whatever, and talk about for you. But anyway, so thanks a lot for watching. We sure appreciate it. Eric and I are going to run off now and drink some Dom Perignon. And in the meantime, I am Captain Logan.
And I'm Eric.
Thanks for watching.